Hey, it's Jeremy, Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you'd like to support this channel, get additional bonus live streams, be able to read my comic books for free before anyone else, you can go over to patreon.com/Jeremy and become a patron. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. For as little as $2 a month, you can get access to all of my creative work, tons of behind-the-scenes content, and as I said, additional bonus live streams twice a month. And if you would like to see the best of my social media posts I share online, all collected in one place in your inbox, receive a free digital sketchbook, and get updates from me once a month where you can see animated GIFs of works in progress. You can sign up for my newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comics, or if you read digitally on Kindle or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books such as my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Or my current series, Morningstar. Morningstar tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. This book contains issues 1 through 4 of an 8-issue series. And if you would like to purchase the final issue of the series, issue 8 recently came out in print. This is the final issue of Morningstar. Issues 5, 6, and 7 are available directly from my website. That's jeremy.net. All right. Let's see. Byron's in the chat. Says I finally managed to make another stream. Well, you know what? Glad you could make it, Byron. Nice to see you. Hope you're having a happy 4th of July. And that goes out to everyone there. Hope you're having a happy and healthy and safe 4th of July. Hope you're getting to spend time with family and friends. You're having an opportunity to relax, kick back, have a little bit of fun. Speaking of having some fun, we are bringing back a feature that used to be a regular staple on my live stream, but I haven't done in a while. And I call that feature Fixing Bad Figure Drawings. So small camera is going to have to be in front of me for a big chunk of this. Let me get my camera situated. So I have been back in figure drawing class. And over the past few months, I've noticed, well, usually after each class, I try to spend a little bit of time going over my works from class. And as you can see from these drawings on the left, these are drawings that I've already gone over. And what I tend to do is, Byron also in the chat says, hope you have a happy 4th as well. Thank you, appreciate it. You know, I'm starting the day off drawing. So that's a good start to any day. For me, that's a happy 4th of July. I have two things that there's three things I try to do when I'm fixing a bad figure drawing. First off, I'm just looking at the proportion and the gesture. I'm trying to look at places where I didn't capture what was really happening with the model, or if the gesture just felt stiff, and I try to look at ways to breathe life into it. But beyond that, I look at fixing proportion and then volume and anatomy. Specifically, when we're talking about volume, what you can see here is I've drawn cross-contour lines across most of the figure for all of these. This is something when my drawings either feel very flat or when they just feel loose and sketchy and they don't feel like a solid object at all. And the purpose of drawing these cross contours is that I'm basically turning the figure, what might be a very loose, like for instance, I've got some sketches up here, and these are pretty loose. You know, a lot of these are maybe 5-minute poses, you know, and you can only get but so much detail in that quick of a time to draw. But I find that going in and sketching doing the cross contour drawings on these helps me in terms of looking at the figure almost like it's a 3D model. So it's a chance to help me come and really focus in on the structure of the figure, figure out what is wrong and why. what are the basic volumes I'm working with, and try and help formulate them in a more accurate way. So I'm going to go through a few older drawings and just see if I can take a look at some that that aren't quite working well, and just try and fix what's going on there. So I've got a pose here that I already tried to draw twice, and it wasn't working for me. So, you know, the legs just felt stiff and awkward. So I'm going to come in here and just see if I can rework these a little bit. Let's see here. All right. Okay. So sometimes I'll just draw directly on the drawing. Sometimes I'll draw a secondary version, you know, just next to it. So this is the one that I'm looking at right here. Well, really both of these. I think that this first one is what I drew while the model was posing. And then while the model was on a break, I was just trying to sit there and figure out what was wrong with it. So a lot of this, the first thing really, I always try to start with a simple line blocking in the proportion of the whole figure. So there's a very light line, and I'm going to draw a little bit darker than I normally draw. I try to force myself actually to draw very light so that it gives me room to come in and adjust and change things as I go. But in this given case, because you guys are watching here, I want to draw a little bit darker just so it'll show up on the screen. Proportion is one of my big bugaboos. If I do not stay on top of it, if I'm not actively trying to keep my proportions correct, they will start getting really wonky really quick. So I start by just framing where the head is going to be and the bottom of the figure. Now, this is taking into account sort of an 8 figures high structure. So in the middle of that will be the bottom of the torso. And I'm tilting it because there's one leg that the weight is resting on, and that hip is going to be up a little bit higher. So I'm going to draw this foot coming down. I'm going to have it come a little bit below that, what I consider that 8 feet, the 8 heads high, what would be the ground plane for a figure standing there. Because as I recall from this model, the leg that's closer to the viewer, the resting leg, was actually pointed out towards us a little bit. So I'm gonna have it come down below and then have the feet come forward a little bit. Then from there, I just try to do a relationship. I try to work from the farthest. I jump around the figure a lot, but the point of this is to give me a sense of what all the parts are doing in relationship to each other. And I actually lose quite a bit of the flow by talking while I'm doing it. I should just sit here and draw, but I feel like I want to explain what I'm doing here. So I'm looking at the relationship between this foot and the other foot, the one that isn't supporting the weight. And it's a little bit higher because it's also moving away from the viewer. So you've got what would be the ground plane moving straight down from the torso. You've got one foot coming towards us, one foot on the other side of that line. This one, the leg is slightly bent. Actually, as I recall, the leg is more than slightly bent. The actual, the foot was going forward a lot more than it was significantly coming forward. Now, another part that I struggle with is getting the sense of the twist of the the torso, the relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. Because if you can make that, if you can capture that in a drawing, a lot of times, whether it's an extreme pose or a subtle pose, capturing that makes all the difference in a drawing feeling like it's got some life and energy to it. So sort of capping that with the head, really simple here. The bottom of the head is actually hidden from us by the back. And something that, again, the whole point of this is that I'm looking at a previous drawing I did. I'm trying to just fix any flaws that I can find in it, of which there's plenty. Really, the biggest flaw that I had is just how awkward and stiff that resting leg is. So I'm going to try both. There's two tactics that I take when I'm trying to repair, when I'm trying to fix bad figure drawings. One is drawing with the cross contours, turning into a 3D model. The other thing is drawing it with just the silhouette of all the major forms, and then drawing the bones inside. And I think I'm going to try doing both in here, just so you guys can see a comparison of what that process is for me. So let me lightly get in the bottom of the rib cage, the top of the pelvis, just lightly indicating those. Before I draw the arms, because the arms are hidden, or the arms are hiding parts of the rib cage. Well, it's a double set of having to draw through the figure, because first you've got the arm that's closest to the viewer, and that one is obscuring the left side of the figure in terms of the outline of the figure. So I'm just trying to get myself to stick to using simple volumes and not get too caught up in the details yet. And now, as I said, in terms of drawing through the figure, the other shoulder, you can see the shoulder from the back, but the arm drops down and then moves across. So the other one is completely hidden by the torso. So you've got this arm hiding the edge of the torso, and you've got the torso hiding the other arm, but then that arm comes around the other side, and the hand of this figure is resting on the side of the arm that's in the front. It's kind of a challenging thing that's going on there. A lot of ins and outs. Now coming down here, I want to try and reinforce that sense of the leg coming, the supporting leg coming towards the viewer. So see if I can, I'm going to try and focus just on a basic cylinder at first, just to give it a sense of foreshortening. And at the same time, get that other leg, get this, try to give it the sense of it receding in space. So you've got these two opposing cylinders, one coming towards us, one moving away. And then this one, the way I'm sketching it in, it's almost like it's coming back towards us, but really it's more moving straight down. I'm just accentuating that curve of the calf muscle. Pencil's a little dull. Should have sharpened it before I started. Let me switch pencils here. Grab one that give me a little bit nicer tone, hopefully. Some nice opposition in the feet here. One point to the left, the other point to the right. So I generally don't do really long labored studies. Most of the time, whenever I do a long drawing, it's not a drawing of figures for the sake of figures. It's usually something that's a little bit more illustrative. I'm either drawing something, a cover for one of my comics, or working on, even when I'm working on a comic book page, each one is a panel is a finished drawing, but they tend to be looser just by virtue of the fact that it's a comic. I don't necessarily have the time to do very long, detailed drawings if I want to get the book done in anything close to a timely manner. So those tend to be still rougher and looser. I've kind of gotten out of the habit of doing really polished pencil drawings, and maybe that's something I need to bring back into my study for personal refinement. So now, as I mentioned before, looking at this phase, I do feel like I'm getting something that feels a little bit less awkward than the angles that were in this rough sketch. Well, the sketch that I did, when I was actually working from the model. But I also feel like I'm not quite getting the angle. I need to round this the opposite way. So it actually feels like the rib cage is bending back, and you're getting a little bit of that. One thing that I think I lost in this is how strong the twist I had in terms of the rib cage tipping to the right. It was a little bit stronger in the earlier two attempts. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring the camera a little bit closer. And I'm going to start doing that practice that I mentioned of see if I can set this up here. That practice that I mentioned of going in and doing cross-axis along the figure. So I'm going to start with this thigh because this is the area that I was having the most trouble with. Trying to see if I can do this, arrange this in such a way that it's more, I can get the camera a little bit even closer. Move some of these a little bit. Let's do these other drawings. Come back to those as I need them. let's move this closer to the camera. See if I can give you guys a better view. And also make it not so awkward for me. Let's bring this down a little bit more. There we go. All right, so in terms of drawing these cross axes, so I'm really just, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term of drawing through the figure, but it's when you're trying to actually imagine that the figure is like a 3D object that you can see through. A wireframe in 3D, or a clear piece of plastic with a grid on it. And the point of doing this is that it really helps me crystallize the types of primitive volumes that I'm using to express this form. And something that I had kind of a mental, I don't want to call it an epiphany because it's more of a theory that I've been testing out and so far has been working well, but I don't want to necessarily say this is an absolute. Also because as somebody who's continually studying the craft of drawing, I find it beneficial to keep my mind open to the fact that any concept I have about drawing, I want to keep it malleable. I don't want to say this is the way or this is how it is. I like to try and stay open to my ideas transforming because, you know, I'm still studying. There's always art books that I'm looking at, trying to learn more from. But one of the things that I have been thinking about in terms of understanding rendering and value is to try and think of these cross axes as a surrogate for rendering. So let's say I've got what I just did here on the leg, and I've got this, you know, this axis here and that axis here. And if you imagine this, these lines as tone, I think it probably works better with the ones that are running parallel to the form. But you can look at this and say, all right, imagine if these lines that are making up this, that are making up these cross axes, imagine if these lines were just blurred. You just had it like everything except for the silhouette was blurred. It's almost like these are just showing you how light's going to wrap around the form. Now, true, I think this works better for more spherical forms where you've got let's say that I were doing a cross-axis or cross-contour lines like this. I think this is probably a better example of what I'm trying to explain, which is if you looked at each of these lines and you just said, all right, what if you know, the lines are getting closer to the light or lighter, the ones farther from the light are darker. And now if you just were to, like, imagine if you just had the lines in Photoshop and you just hit them with a hard Gaussian blur, but it was only the lines inside of the silhouette, it might give you that sense of, oh, now you're starting to see that rendered sphere that like a lot of people draw when they're trying to work out rendering. You've got your core shadow, your terminator in there, a little bit of halftone, a local tone around the edges of that sphere. Maybe if you don't go all the way to black at the edge, there's a little bit of reflected light. Depending on how you're rendering it, you can have a lot of reflected light. Let's see. I see Dizzy's in the chat. Dizzy says, "Yo, how you doing, Dizzy? Just sitting here working on some work from my figure drawing classes. I take figure drawing classes online with an instructor named Carl Ganas, and I try to go through those drawings after class and just. I always say that I learn more from my bad figure drawings than I do from my good figure drawings, in the sense that when I do a good drawing, I am proud of it. I am happy that I did something successful. But when I have a bad drawing, it's like a big neon sign telling me these are the things I need to practice. These are the things that I don't know about drawing. And that is the most useful thing for me in a figure drawing class. Byron says, he says, it's like I always tell people, if you can figure out the contours of an object, you can figure out the lighting. Yes, I completely agree with that. Yeah, the contours, specifically, yeah, the cross contours showing you the volume of an object help you understand how light is going to wrap around it. I mean, really, you can use these lines as a way of describing how you want to have light wrap around it. If I were doing a study that was delicate enough that, let's say with these contour lines, if I actually were drawing the line where it got lighter as you reach the high point, this hidden corner, and then I had it dark, the contour darker on this side, and then light right here. So there's a little bit, honestly, there's a highlight running down. You could actually plan your rendering by doing these lines before you do any rendering at all. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And again, this is something that I use when I'm having, this is a, a diagnostic tool that I'll use when I'm having problems with drawings. I will come in and I will do that, you know, what I'm doing here. I will just run cross contour and try to figure out why does this not look right? And it's more often than not, it's that I have a poorly conceived volume. It's either the volume is either working against the anatomy, or it just, you know, it just doesn't make sense for the pose. And if I can fix those volumes, then I can have a drawing that will hopefully have the energy of the gesture that I want. It will feel like it's actually a three-dimensional object, and I can light it properly. I mean, when it comes to lighting, I don't claim to be a master of any particular aspect of the craft of drawing, but I try to keep my lighting really simple. You know, I rarely do like a 2-light setup. Usually I just pick one direction and have the lighting coming from that. Now what's interesting here is I can use the cross-axis to help me describe anatomy, where I've got the pelvis, you know, the side of the pelvis, just the fact that I'm doing this line, this direction change, showing the difference between the side of this volume, the top of this volume, and I'm not going to get in here and draw deep detail of the back muscles, but much in the same way that we've got that we've got our ab muscles, the back muscles are almost like a thinner, without having the horizontal splits of the ab. You've got these thin, strong pillars running up the spine, protecting the spine, giving us a lot of mobility. At least until you stop exercising, and then you get all kinds of back problems. Yeah, these muscles are super important to keep in shape. And I've just got it basically coming down into the tailbone. So, most of what I'm doing here is I'm describing muscle mass with these cross contours. But I am, paying attention to some muscular volumes some skeletal volumes, like the tailbone as it is. But now I'm just, working in simple spheres here. I should turn this instead of just drawing, continuing going that way. This should now be turning. And this one actually should be coming out a little bit more. Now this one is, the lower leg should be a little bit, not so much of a circle, but you get a little bit of that going into the leg. It's not getting pressed up the way the supporting leg will be pressing that one up. Yeah, Dizzy's sitting there laughing his ass off in the chat. Byron says, I know those back issues far too well from sitting too long every day. It took me a long time to get into the habit. I had to have some serious sciatic problems a couple of years ago. Not I had to, but having serious sciatic problems really helped me in terms of committing to making sure I got regular exercise. Trying not to stay in my seat all day. I usually will make myself get up once an hour, not just for my back, but also good rest for my eyes as well. But I try to get up from my desk once an hour, go for a short walk. Doing a little bit of yoga a couple times a week. Nothing crazy, not going to a yoga studio, just watching a video online and going through a short half-hour routine. That'll keep me limber, work on my core a little bit. I've talked about this in my live stream before, that I don't think artists understand when they're younger how important it is to maintain our health. And a lot of artists are not necessarily the types to want to go out and exercise, work out, go biking and hiking. It depends. Some people are real nature lovers and really do enjoy being outdoor and active. But for many artists, it is, commonplace to want to just enjoy being in the studio, being at that chair. And when you're young, your body can kind of tolerate that. You don't really realize how bad it is for you until, unfortunately, sometimes it's too late. You develop some serious health problems. Some people develop serious health problems from not getting enough exercise. So I just tell people, get out, stay active, keep your body moving. At this point, I'm just finishing up rendering here. It's almost like if you guys, for any X-Men fans up there, it's like I'm turning this model into Colossus. I'm just, gridding across the form, and I'm using these grids to help describe the basic volumes of anatomy. So this is something, like I said, when I'm having trouble with a figure, when it looks lumpy, it doesn't look like there's structure, I'll draw a diagram like this and just work out all of the elements of it. And this will help me figure out what I'm doing wrong with the figure drawing, and then maybe come back in and try to do a drawing with this fixed. Let's see here. Dizzy says, I know a lot of artists who are starting to use a standing desk. Yes, actually, oddly enough, I don't have a standing desk for drawing. I still draw sitting at my table, but my day job, I do a lot of graphic design work, and I'm at the computer all day. And for that, I do have a standing desk. So I suppose if I were drawing full time, I probably would invest in either a standing desk or a standing easel. And I would just have my drawing board and my work just pegged up there, so I can kind of go back and forth between desk and easel, something like that. But yeah, I definitely think that's a great idea to have a setup where you can do some standing desk, so that you can draw from a standing position, having a Cintiq on there, or what your drawing tablet of choice. So Byron says, but Jeremy, there's a giant flaming ball of fire in the sky. The outside is dangerous, especially right now in the the western states. We definitely have a heat wave going on, so it's extra fiery, dangerous. It's crispy. There be monsters out there, but even with that, I think in the long run, it's worth it to get a little bit crispy if it'll keep your body able to keep making art for a few years longer without some pain. That's what sunglasses are for. Protect the eyes from that ball of fire. Byron says Colossus is a lot more voluptuous than I remember. Well, maybe this Colossus went through the Siege Perilous. So, as I mentioned, I'm just going to redo this drawing that I did right here, but showing you the other technique that I try for fixing anatomical problems, or diagnosing them, rather. And that is trying to draw the skeleton within the figure. So like the first one, I'm just keeping it a nice, loose gesture. Yeah, it's pretty much the same as what I did before, except this time I didn't spend as much time sketching the legs in. And I think part of that is, like I said, that's one of the benefits of sitting down and redrawing a problem drawing, whether it's a figure, an animal, an environment, that act of going through and trying to break down what's not working with it, when you come back and take another pass at it, a lot more things make sense. This gesture feels a lot easier for me to draw. I've drawn it a few times now. And as I'm doing the gesture, believe it or not, I'm keeping a lot of these structural things that I've looked at and analyzed. I'm keeping a lot of these things in mind. As I'm going through and loosely blocking in these elements. So at this point, I've got a simple, kind of a hollow figure. It's a loose silhouette with kind of an indication of the joints, but not too much anatomy. And from here, I would start doing the technique of working out what are the major anatomical structures. Brace that hand's a little bit too long there. I think these shoulders are actually out a little too much. The shoulder in a little bit. Shoulders raised, but it's still in somewhat. So from here, I'm going to start with just a simple rib cage. Indicate those floating ribs coming down. Now I'm going to put the shoulder blades in here. Now the shoulder blades, this one is pressed closer to the spine. And interestingly, the other one, this arm is kind of reaching around. And even though it's coming down, sort of more out. It's going to be a little further away, and you're also going to see less of it because the rib cage, let's forget, is not square. I will often use a box if I'm trying to work out the fronts and sides of it, but hang on. The shoulder blade does need to be higher up. It's a little nuts there, although I had it. But it's, you know, it's a rounded surface. So as the shoulder blade is going around, this shoulder blade, the one that's closest to us, we're seeing it at an angle because this shoulder is pushed back a little bit. So we're kind of looking at it on a profile. Now this one, if the shoulder were just relaxed and kind of normal, we'd still be seeing it at a shallow angle because this surface is curving around. As we've seen on that first cross contour drawing, it's curving around the surface. But it's like a flat, it's like kind of like the surface of an eggshell. If you're looking at it straight on, you might be seeing it like this. But if you're either looking at the rib cage from a 3/4 view, and even more if you're looking at it from a 3/4 view, and the arm is pulling forward, the arm, if it's pulling forward, this thing is going to rotate to the side, and you're going to be seeing it at a shallow angle. So you're seeing both of these at shallow angles for different reasons. If this arm, the arm on the left, were just straight forward, then you would be looking at it, it would be almost like a front view. Because you're looking at something that's on a turn, on a curve, but you're just positioned, the angle is showing you the broadest side of it. So when I'm doing this, I might indicate a bit of muscle, but a lot of the reason for me to draw the skeleton of the figure is because I'm just trying to understand what the bones are doing, because that's the other problem that I have. Like if I have a drawing where it's not making a lot of sense to me, I can't quite figure out what's going on with the anatomy. If I can figure out what the bones are doing, then the muscles kind of fall into place. So, we've got the tailbone here. Let me give a little lip service to the spine. I don't need to draw the spinal column in detail with all of the spurs that are on it that the muscles rest in. I want to draw at least enough of an indication of it before it gets down to the actual tailbone itself. I picked up the pencil that I put down earlier. So, and again, when I'm doing this, I am thinking in terms of the same volumes that I worked out in the cross-axis. I'm thinking about the anatomy in that sense. Now, the pelvis is one of the more awkward shaped bones in the body. And I think it would be difficult for me to try and describe to you the mindset behind what I'm drawing here. Learning to draw the pelvis is its own thing, because if you draw it exactly as you understand the bones to exist, you still tend to get something that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It looks like a bunch of weird hooks and shapes. What I can tell you is that I've got a skeleton behind me, and the combination of drawing that skeleton from different angles, drawing the pelvis from different anatomy books, and trying to draw it from imagination, eventually you start figuring out how to simplify the pelvis in a way that makes sense to you. I mean, the big feature are the two large forms that make the iliac crest. The large bones that really are like the bowl that the guts, the organs sit in. Then coming out of that is the notch where the head of the femur fits into. And there's kind of two balls here, because there's the socket, there's the ball that fits into the socket, and then out of that is a second ball, which is actually the head of the femur. It's called the great trochanter. Then this just comes down. It's big up at the top, it gets slender, and then it gets large at the end. We've got the notch that the knee fits into that connects to the tibia, which is the shin bone. We draw both of these now. And I'm going to do a little cross-axis. I'm going to combine exercises here a little bit, and I'm going to throw some cross-axis on this because obviously the reason, not obviously, it may not be obvious at all. The reason why this femur is so much shorter is because you're looking at it in perspective. Don't forget, it's moving away from us in space. This other one, this other femur, is also it's moving towards us in space. So while there is foreshortening going on in here as well, because it's moving towards as opposed to away, it's going to be a little bit longer, and also because it is more vertical. We're still seeing more of the length of this as opposed to the one over here. We're seeing more of a kind of a 3/4 a 3/4 view of it. So it's just going to appear shorter because, as opposed to looking at it like this, we've got the standing leg we're looking at like this. We've got the resting leg like that. See, this is taking up almost the complete length of the screen, whereas just by turning it, you get a lot more space. So. So again, I mean, that's kind of the interesting comparison between these two approaches for trying to diagnose bad figure drawings, is that, you know, going hand in hand, you're always trying to figure out how to make, whether you're looking at the bones themselves or just the muscle masses, you're trying to figure out how to make them feel, you're not trying to make them feel photorealistically three-dimensional, you're just trying to make them feel like actual volumes. When I say actual volumes, I mean as opposed to just like a silhouette outline that doesn't feel like it has a top and a front and a side, something that, you know, that feels flat, like a shrinky dink or a color form. I don't know if you, like a sticker. You don't want it to feel like a sticker. You want it to feel like a sculpture. So you've got the shin bone, which I rarely draw. See, this is the interesting thing. When I'm drawing the shin bone, it's usually because I'm drawing the figure from the front, because when I'm drawing the rear, I'm usually drawing muscle on top. I'm drawing that calf that's really prominent. And there's another muscle beneath the calf called the soleus. It's another thin muscle. And you've got the tendons of both coming down into the heel, the Achilles tendon. But when I'm drawing it without any muscle at all, I actually realized, I think this may be the first time I've ever drawn the bone of the shin from the back. So it comes down and it ends again in a little bit of a notch that makes up the ankle. I'm going to draw this lightly because there's another bone on the outside. There's the tibia, which is the main shin bone, and there's a smaller bone called the fibula. And that one is just, it's off to the side and slightly behind the front of the bone. And that one's coming down. So the tibia forms the inside of the ankle. The fibula forms the outside of the ankle. And you just got the heel bone in between that little pincer. You've got the phalanges of the foot coming out. You know what? I just sort of scribbled that in there. That's not a very good. I'm faking it instead of drawing the real thing. And I'll tell you, honestly, what I should do. Let's see. We're an hour in. I guess we got a little time. What I should do is when I catch myself doing that, because I do catch myself scribbling in anatomical forms. And when I do, this is the important reason for doing this, is I catch things that I don't know about the body. And I'm like, why am I cheating? I'm cheating because I don't know. Let's see here. Dizzy in the chat says, very helpful. I'm glad you find it helpful. Byron says you have to especially be careful with the pelvis due to the fact that it's very different depending on the sex. A trapezoid is probably the best way to simplify the pelvis for a beginner. Yes, that's very true. The pelvis is wider, and I believe it's wider and shorter for women, and it is narrower and taller for men. So, a trapezoid is good, whereas with men it's a little bit, boxy. It doesn't flare out as much. But what I was going to say is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach behind me on my bookshelf, and I am going to grab an anatomy book, because this is the other thing that's crucial for me in terms of doing these kinds of studies. That's how I keep myself honest, and this is how I keep learning. When I'm doing studies like this and I'm drawing something from an angle that I haven't drawn it from before, and I find myself doing what I did with the ankle, where I just scribble it in, it means I am pretending that I know something, and I really don't. And by the way, what I'm also doing right here real quick is I'm just drawing a little bit. There's an extra bone. There's an extra nub. There's the greater trochanter, which is the head of the femur. And maybe the problem is this wrist is coming down, covering the same thing. But there's another lesser trochanter. This is a nub that muscles attached to the adductors to pull the thighs in, to pull the femur towards the center. So if you're doing the splits, you're trying to pull them back together, the muscles that do that are attached to that notch. So this is the anatomy book that I tend to work from. It's called The Atlas of Human Anatomy for the Artist by Stephen Peck. Go over here and flip through to the bones. The ankle bones. Head. Okay, here we go. Let's see if they have a shot from the rear. Okay, so this is what I'm missing. And I'm going to have to use a bit of extrapolation and a bit of imagination, because I'm basically going to imagine drawing this, but drawing the flip side. And there's a diagram showing in this book what that looks like from the flip side. There's right here, there's two diagrams in this book. This one and that one. So these are both showing what I'm going to be drawing, but they're like silhouettes. And basically what they're doing is they're emphasizing the bottom planes, or the planes that are facing away from the light in these. And I want to get a look at the bones themselves, the shape of them. So what I neglected here is the bone that both the heel and then the tarsals, well, I guess they're the metatarsals. The tarsals and metatarsals. Basically, we have carpals, like when you get carpal tunnel, we have carpals and metacarpals. Those are the wrist bones. And then we've got the phalanges, which are the actual fingers. So where you've got carpals in the feet, they're called tarsals. I don't know why. But point being is that the bone that all of them come out from is a bone called the talus. And this surface fits in between this notch I was telling you about, the fibula that's on the outside, the tibia, which is the main shin bone. So those form a notch that the talus is in. So what I was missing, slide this up so you can see it. What I was missing is this keystone that's in between there. Now behind that is the volume that makes up the heel bone. So you've got a bone that's the keystone that fits in between. You get the heel coming out on one side. Then on the front side, you've got a collection of tarsals and metatarsals. The bottom of the metatarsals is what makes the ball of the foot. You've got the heel and the ball And it's always weird because the heel itself looks like kind of a ball to me, so I always find it weird that the balls of your feet are that part that's on the other side of the arch. But that's what it is. And then coming forward are the phalanges, which are just the individual actual toes. And I don't need to draw the detail of the toes. But now I have this in my head, and hopefully whenever I come to draw a heel in the future, I can remember the fact that whenever I'm just going to randomly draw a 3/4 but facing the opposite direction. Let's say I've got a tibia, and the inside of the ankle is a little higher than the outside. So I've got a tibia here, and I've got a fibula over here, forming the other side, the lower side. Hopefully I will just remember there's a keystone, a talus. It's squarer than I drew. Funny you mentioned trapezoids, Byron, in terms of the pelvis, because the talus in itself is kind of a lumpy trapezoid. But knowing that there's a keystone that fits in there, the heel bone is coming out from behind that. I'm only going to draw half of it because the rest is going to be covered by the tarsals and metatarsals. Hang on. This is too low. You guys can't see what I'm drawing here. Tarsals and metatarsals. It's the downside of having my camera so close, is that I occasionally will miss if it's not on screen. And you've got the phalanges, or toes. Even these, I'm kind of loosely cheating them instead of really drawing detailed toes. I think that's more of a desire to get back to this top figure than it is me saying, oh, than something that I would need to look up and say, oh, I'm cheating again. I am cheating. But yeah, hopefully I can remember that concept, because there's certain anatomical concepts like the armpit is something that no matter how much I study it, I draw it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I remember it being. But when I'm just drawing out of my head, I frequently will forget and just not draw the muscles in the proper order, with both the latissimus coming up and going into the armpit, but then also the teres major coming in from the outside, and both of those going in between the deltoid and the bicep. And then having the tricep come out from underneath there. It all gets a little bit wonky, and I feel like I tell myself I need to just remember what I should do, and what I've been joking about, but it really isn't a joke. It's just I should force myself to draw a diagram of the armpit once a week so that I never forget. Hey, I see Wasim is in the chat, says, good evening from Morocco. Good evening to you. Thank you. Byron also says welcome. Nice to have you. Thank you for joining us. I'm probably only going to be drawing for another 10 minutes or so. And I don't know how much of the stream you were watching before, but what I'm doing is I attend figure drawing classes regularly. And for every good drawing I do, I usually do about 10 bad drawings. But I find that I learn so much more by going through my bad drawings and analyzing what the mistakes are. Because a lot of people get upset when they do bad drawings. They get upset when they're doing drawings in figure drawing classes, at how hard it is, and that, you know, it's very difficult to get something when you're drawing quickly from a live model, getting things to come out the way that you want them to. But I feel like a bad drawing is like a big roadmap for you. It shows for me, I feel like it shows me all of the things I'm doing wrong. And if I can listen and learn and study those things, then it will help me stop making those mistakes. So what I'm doing here is a pose that I already drew once before. I did one drawing in this session where I drew cross contour lines across the whole thing to help me understand the volumes, the directions that the masses are going. So I'm working just in terms of the main masses of the muscles. And the other tactic that I have to help me diagnose my bad drawings is coming in and drawing just a simple silhouette lightly, and then coming in and drawing the anatomy, the bones, just the bones. So one is a way that I use to diagnose my my muscular volumes, and the other one is one I use to diagnose the bones, the landmarks. But both are very useful to me. In terms of gaining a better understanding of what is going wrong in a drawing. And again, that capstone that's in there and the tarsals. In fact, drawing the foot from this angle, let me erase the little bit of that diagram that I have underneath, because it's getting in the way. Just from having done that little extra step of trying to understand the structure, the bone structure of the ankle, makes this other foot that I'm drawing feel much easier to draw. And the idea also of doing these diagrams is not that when I am doing a full figure drawing, either as a longer exercise or just a quick drawing in class, it's not that the goal now is to make all of these bones or all of these muscles present in the drawing. It's that by understanding both the bones and muscles that comprise the human body, I can look at forms that I don't quite understand, and I can make the anatomy conform to my simple volumes better if I understand what that anatomy is. So it's a way of me structuring, studying both masses and structure. Let's see here. I 100% agree. Byron says, you can learn a lot from a bad drawing so long as you pay attention and study what went wrong. Very, very, very true. I will tell you that the instructor that I studied with, Carl Ganas, for many years I studied with him, and he would tell students, look at your drawings from class, go home after class and go over them, analyze them. He didn't necessarily say redraw them. This makes a tangent. That bothers me. Now see, this is what's interesting. The actual contour of the arm does not make a tangent. It goes in, it goes behind the pelvis at a spot that does not create a tangent, and I think is aesthetically pleasing. But if I draw this bone, that bone is going right in at a place that makes a tangent. And now I'm like, I can't cut a brick. I'm studying the bones, but it's still, my instinct is to fight against tangents. So I'm actually going to move this bone in more. I think it probably should be, just because I don't want that tangent there and it irritates me. Let's see here. I'm going to come up here and draw the 7th cervical vertebrae, just the end of the neck, the beginning of the rib cage. the thoracic vertebrae. There's three categories. There's the cervical vertebrae, which are the vertebrae of the neck, the thoracic vertebrae, which are the vertebrae of the rib cage, and the lumbar vertebrae, which are the vertebrae of the lower back once you get beyond the rib cage. So those are the three sections. Like if you're at a baseball game, it's whether you're sitting, on deck, the loge or the nosebleed seats. And again, I'm not necessarily concentrating on the shape of the individual vertebrae. I'm just indicating that this is that the spinal column is a segmented column going up and back. And I'm not going to worry about the bones of the skull because drawing the head is a whole endeavor unto itself, which is why a lot of my figure drawings have minimal faces. They really just have kind of the shape of the skull at best, not because it's not important, but when studying the whole figure, the face is so complicated that there's a reason why there are portrait artists, people who just focus on drawing beautiful representations of people's faces, because it takes a lot of care and attention, and it's not necessarily something you have time for in a figure drawing. So now I'm going to draw in the head of the humerus up here. The humerus is the upper arm bone. And again, much like the femur, which is the long thigh bone, this one, it has a head and then comes down again into two bones, two condyles that the elbow fits into. So the elbow itself is not part of the upper arm. It's a bone of the lower arm. It's the ulna, which is the long bone that runs all the way down from your wrist. There's a little nub at the end of your wrist, and it runs all the way down. You can put your finger on that nub and just run your hand down that nub from the side of your palm. Run your hand down that bone all the way down. And if you press your finger against it, you will feel that even if you've got muscle around there, you will get to your elbow. And you're like, oh, that's one bone that's just running all the way down. And the elbow, it's big and large down here. It's tiny at the top. The other bone, the radius, which it's called that because it radiates around the ulna, the other bone that makes up the forearm is large in that, kind of like the ankle, it becomes the larger part of the pincer that the wrist bones fit into. It's large at this end, but if you follow it up here, most of the time you can't even really feel where it attaches, but it becomes a small nub where it attaches to the upper arm. So the forearm, it's kind of like the bones are kind of inversions of themselves. The elbow is large and then comes to a tiny bone, which is the ulna. The radius is large at the wrist and becomes a tiny bone that fits into a notch right next to the elbow. Let's see here. Byron says too many people are scared or get down on themselves about bad drawings. So being afraid to face that will make improvement difficult. Well, you know what? That's actually that's a great point. It's one of the reasons why I want to do these studies publicly, because I think it's very nice if people say something nice about a drawing that I did. If I'm working on a piece, a comic page, or I'm sharing an illustration I'm doing and people say positive things, I am grateful for anybody that has anything nice to say about my work. But I personally am very, very critical of my own work. But I try to be critical constructively. I don't try to say, oh, this just sucks, or I'm not happy with it, or I'm down on myself. I try to use the criticism as my internal feeling that something isn't working or something isn't right. I try to use that as a motivator for learning and understanding. And I also feel like sharing that it's far from many, like very few of my drawings just come out well. Most of anything I do that anyone has anything nice to say about, I had to fight and scratch and claw and redraw and do multiple thumbnails and look up reference and do all of these things to get a good drawing out of. So, there are artists in the world that just seem to be able to do speed paintings and just knock out dope art after dope art. That's great. I'm not one of those people. And my hope is by sharing just doing the work and letting other people know that, hey, it doesn't come naturally to everybody. But if you take the time and do studies of your work that isn't working, you get reference for things that you're doing that don't look right. You redraw and analyze that. It may take you longer to get to a piece that's polished, that you're proud of, but for many artists, that's actually the path to get there. And I kind of want to destigmatize doing bad drawings. I mean, it's not like you should just suck. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is bad drawings are part of the path to good drawings. And if you keep saying, well, I don't want to do bad work, if you don't engage, like Byron said, if you don't engage with the things that aren't working, you're never going to get to the things that do work. So hopefully that's one thing that I'm sharing and trying to put out there for people to encourage them to study. And I will tell you the biggest thing that has helped me improve and grow as an artist is going to figure drawing classes. And yes, I know in this year of quarantine that people can't go to classes, or things are just starting to open up now wherever you are, and hopefully you're able to be able to attend those types of things. But when things are safe for you wherever you are in the world, if they're available, I highly encourage going to a figure drawing class in person. I've been attending classes during the pandemic year virtually, and I will say that it is absolutely not the same. There's nothing that will replace learning in person from a knowledgeable instructor. But that said, having had the experience of drawing drawing in person, I can take a lot of what I've learned and apply it to hopefully make better work and still reap the benefits of doing anatomical studies, doing figure studies, working from a model when you're doing a session on Zoom or whatever mobile platform, whatever video conferencing platform, because there are places where you can go and find models right now to work from and do online sessions, like 3-hour sessions or something for a reasonable price. So, and like I said, working from live classes, in-person classes, has made it possible for me to, I think, get the benefits that I am reaping from the classes that are virtual. But I think it's better than nothing. If you've never taken a class from a model before, with a live model before, I think it's still worth it to look up virtual classes and try one. So. I will mention the instructor that I stay with, Carl Ganas. His website is figuredrawingschool.com, and he just started a new session. And you might be able to squeak in if he's got classes that aren't full. I don't know if he's accepting students once the sessions will begin, but this is just the first week. So, it's worth heading on over there. And if you want to get in on some figure drawing for a model. Yeah, so I think that we're just about done here. And I'm just adding in a little bit of the surface silhouette of the figure here, just to kind of round that out. So I didn't do a lot of very fast drawings. A lot of times when I'm doing studies like these, I will work very quickly, and I'll do maybe not as many anatomical studies like these, but what I'll do is I'll do 2 or 3 sketches that are maybe only as detailed as the other drawings on this sheet, trying to work out what's wrong with the pose. And then if I draw a pose 2 or 3 times and I am like, there's something here that I'm not getting, that I'm missing, that's when I will move to doing some diagnostic drawing cross contour or drawing transparent bodies. That's a phrase I heard from Sarah Simblett in her book Anatomy for the Artist. I'm sure there's other phrases for what you call it when you're drawing, a simple silhouette of a figure with the skeleton inside. I've been doing in my art book study group that we do for Patreon, we've been studying Walt Reed, his book, The Figure, and he actually does studies like this as well. I'm gonna go look that up as soon as I'm done with this live stream and see what he calls them. But as you can see here, understanding what's going on inside of the figure, I think really helps with the understanding of what's going on structure, understanding this structure, both in terms of volumes and skeletal. I think it really helps refine and understand the figures, such that if I were to come back and do a full surface figure drawing with anatomy now, I've got a much better understanding of everything that's happening there. And I can choose what to simplify, what to add, what to remove, so that it expresses what I'm trying to get down on the page. So last couple of comments here. And Byron, Wassam also says, definitely agree. Thank you, appreciate it. And thank you so much for being here again. Byron, says, everybody has to remember as well that most people only post their best stuff online. Rarely do you see all the struggle paintings and drawings that happen between those. It's funny that I've been thinking about, for instance, going back and cleaning up my my Instagram timeline. But the fact that I share figure drawings in there, I share comic book work, I share personal illustrations. So my Instagram timeline, my social media posts, it's kind of a dumpster fire in that it's a little bit all over the place. It's not as well curated as I think people who are more financially successful just from art alone tend to have very well curated social media, well curated Instagram feeds. And I've been wondering how to handle that, whether I haven't really used the highlights feature to create categories within it, but I've been wondering about, and I don't have any answers yet. I'm just kind of talking out loud. So if people have thoughts in the comments and the chats, and I don't know, I've thought about the idea of having a separate Instagram feed for figure drawing versus comic book work versus illustration work, so that all 3 feeds have a consistent look. Because the artists that I really admire have very clean feeds. They have like having a consistent portfolio where everything looks of the same style and level of finishing quality. That's what I tend to admire in other artists. I'm not doing that with my own work. I'm showing a lot of these sketches, the process work, the figure drawing stuff is sort of, it's all over. I share a lot of thumbnails. My stuff is so much process work. And I'm wondering whether I need to not share as much process work, but I feel like that's why it's the main thing I have to share. Whether it's a matter of creating separate feeds for process, or whether it's creating separate feeds for process for each type of work. I mean, there's a lot of ways to chop it up. I'd love to hear people's feedback and thoughts in the comments. Byron also mentions the Croquis Cafe, so that comes to mind for that kind of thing. Yes, the Croquis Cafe. I'll have to put a link in the chat for both Carl Ganaz for the Croquis Cafe. Croquis Cafe doesn't have instructed classes, at least not as far as I know. They may have added them. But they do have online timed figure drawing pose sessions that you can pay for as you subscribe to the service. And then they've got tons of free. They still have some free videos on Vimeo, but now a lot of their content is behind a paywall. But it's well worth it. The subscription is very reasonable. It's less than $20 a month. Which, if you're going to a figure drawing session, most figure drawing sessions are $20 per session. So if you're going weekly like I do, you're paying at least $20 a week for that. So the Croquis Cafe is quite a deal for that. Byron says, but I love that dumpster fire. Thank you, Byron. I appreciate it very, very much. All right, guys. So let's wrap stuff up here. And again, for those of you that want to support this channel, if you would like to get additional bonus live streams at least twice a month, like I said, the type of analysis I'm doing here, we do with the finest of art books out there. Most recently, we've been working from Art Reads the Figure. Let's see. Got this handy dandy book over here. So we go through books on my bookshelf and we just go through page by page and study, much in the same way that I'm studying my own drawings. I'll copy from the book, but I'm not copying to do a master study. I'm copying to suck the information out of the book. I'm trying to copy for learning and understanding as opposed to just doing a representative, accurate recreation. All of that, along with all of my comic book work, tons of work in progress, GIFs, blog posts telling you about my day-to-day creative life. All of that is available for as little as $2 a month. Go to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter. You'll get a free digital sketchbook containing the rough sketch versions of the first 3 issues of my comic Morningstar. Along with that, you'll get a monthly newsletter from me containing work in progress animated GIFs, the best of my posts from social media. I have a little section I call the media diet where I just mention whatever books or whatever books I may be reading or films I may be watching. All of that is in my newsletter. You can get that at newsletter.jeremy.net. Links for all these are at the link tree that's in the description for this video. And finally, if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics, if you read digitally on Kindle or Comixology, go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a self-contained psychological thriller. It's about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can see there's a couple of pages here, but you can read preview pages on the actual website there if you follow the link. You can also pick up volume 1 of my comic book Morningstar. It's Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. This book has issues 1 through 4 of an 8-issue series. This is the first half. You can see that, a lot of action, Western, supernatural horror, a little bit of a biblical twist to it. And you can also, directly from my website, jeremy.net, you can pick up the last 4 issues. So these are just standalone individual comics. They aren't collected into a trade yet. Go to jeremy.net. You get issues 5 through 8 of my comic Morningstar. I just recently published the final issue. Very proud of that. So that is everything. All right, guys. Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out and joining. Byron, again, thank you for all the wonderful comments, the great conversation. I'm really glad you were able to catch this one. It was a really fun conversation. He mentions what I was talking about earlier about social media feeds. He says, I see what you mean. I think it depends if people are primarily there to see your process work. Maybe it's best to keep it all together. But if you prefer one, maybe separating them is better. You know, I haven't figured out the best way to do it yet. Like I said, I'm open to feedback. Maybe I'll do a trial, couple of, it doesn't hurt to create separate Instagram feeds and just see what happens with different types of work. But everybody watching, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you haven't watched before. Please share if you know of anybody else, other creatives in your life that would enjoy this kind of content. I greatly appreciate your time, you guys hanging out and spending time with me, sharing this creative process. That's it for now. Go be creative.